Today's video is a beginner-friendly watercolor tutorial for this watermelon bookmark. The thing I love about watercolor is that it's a relatively inexpensive hobby to get into. I personally believe that you don't have to spend a lot of money on a watercolor paint palette to be able to create beautiful pieces. The one I'm using in this video I got from Michael's. They don't seem to have the exact one anymore, but this is the closest I could find. The one thing I do find that makes the biggest difference in your watercolor painting outcome is what paper you use. I use the Arches 140-pound cold pressed 100% cotton paper, and it's by far the best watercolor paper I've ever used. Brushes can also make a difference, but you really don't need anything fancy to start out, and if you're just starting, you really only need one brush, and that is a round brush. The one in the video I'm using is a size 10, and it's my go-to brush for basically every watercolor painting that I do. I also use a 1/2-inch oval mop brush in this tutorial, but you really don't need it. I find that it's just nicer to lay down an even background, but the size 10 round brush works for that too. In this tutorial, I use washi tape to hold down the paper, but I actually find that painter's tape works better because it doesn't lift when it gets wet, so your border remains nice and crisp. For finishing off my bookmarks, I like the look of rounded edges. I feel like it gives it a finished look, and you also have less of a chance of bending the corner when you're using it in your book, but that's just a personal choice and why I have the paper corner rounder included here. And last but not least, you will of course need a glass of water to wet your paints and to rinse your brushes, as well as a paper towel. I've also put both Canadian and US links to everything, or at least the most similar products I used, down below. To begin this tutorial, I've cut down a piece of watercolor paper to a 2" by 6" rectangle. Using my tape, I'll create an even border about 1/4 of an inch all the way around the entire piece of paper. After wetting your brush, here I'm using the oval mop brush, select which color you would like as your background color. I'm going with a light green to keep within the color palette of the watermelon, but the choice is really up to you. Keep in mind that the watercolor paints are very thin layers, and your background color of choice may slightly alter the color of your watermelon slices that we'll start painting next. Once you've finished painting a light, even layer for your background, you can either leave it to dry for approximately 10 to 20 minutes, or you can use a heat gun to speed up the process like I do here. Using the back of your hand to make sure our paint is now dry, we can move on to painting the watermelon slices. Now, using our round brush, we are going to start by getting our brush wet and mixing up a light green for the watermelon skin. You're free to use one of the greens that already exist in your palette without mixing, but I just wanted to get a little bit closer to resembling the green I think of when it comes to watermelons. To paint the watermelon skin, we'll create small, slightly curved lines, each facing in different directions to create some variance and interest. Make sure you leave enough room between these lines to paint the inner triangles of the watermelon slices later. While the paint is still wet on the green lines, you can add as little or as much detail to create the watermelon skin as you would like. You don't have to wait for the green to dry to move on to painting the inner part of the watermelon, but make sure that you do rinse your brush before moving on to mix up a deep pinky red to resemble the inside of the watermelon. When we start to paint the triangles on the inner curves of the green lines, make sure to leave a small gap between as to mimic the white rind of the watermelon. I like painting a few triangles without re-wetting my brush and then going back in to add extra pigment where I want it to add more depth to a few of the slices. Feel free to add a bit more paint to the edges of the triangles by lightly tapping your brush to the wet areas so that it gives a more pigmented look. Now, we want to wait until all of our triangles are completely dry before moving on to painting the seeds so that the black stays as the little dots that we want them to be instead of mixing in with our triangles. While we're waiting, make sure that you rinse your brush again so that it's nice and clean for the next step. It should take about 2 to 5 minutes for the triangles to dry depending on how much water you use to create your slices. Once you're sure your slices are dry, we're going to use a little bit of our black paint on the tip of our brush to create little seeds on each of the slices. Because of the size of the slices, we'll want to paint anywhere from 1 to 3 seeds. Any more than that, and it may start to feel overcrowded. Psychologically, our brains like to see uneven numbers of objects when it comes to design, so 3 seeds will usually look the most visually appealing, but feel free to mix it up however you like. Once your seeds are dry, you can peel off the tape to reveal those nice, crisp, bordered edges. Like I said in the beginning, I like to round out the corner of my bookmarks to finish them off, but that's just a personal preference. Sometimes I'll also laminate my bookmarks so that I know they'll be protected and last a long time. If that's something that you also decide that you want to do, I have the laminator I used in my links as well. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and make sure to subscribe so we can create more arts and crafts content together.